Okay, now let's move to the next section where we get this question like, okay, now we know somewhat about like what automation is and what are the automation tools and what are the things. Where will these skills take me? So now we will be discussing about the career opportunities we can get through learning Selenium. This career section is through Selenium itself. So let's get started. Let's see about the first entry role which we can get as an automation tester. So you can see the average CTC here is like around from 4.5 to 7.5 LPA. This is CTC and not in hand. So in hand is always less compared to the CTC. So just sharing that thing, because before joining any company you need to know this. Okay, what are the skills required? So as this is the just a beginner role, like just starter phase, right? This is what I was when I started as an intern. So that role just requires you some basics of Java, Python. Okay, then I have mentioned something about locators and commands. So what is locators? In the demo which we have today, in that section I will tell you some more info about locators and how we actually look for locators. Okay, then here comes some understanding needed for TestNG and JUnit. So what is TestNG and what is JUnit? So TestNG and JUnit are the frameworks which we already had a mention about in the previous section. So let me just show you. Yes. So the automation tool. Then second thing is the language, the programming language, and then comes the framework. That's what makes an entire automation suite. Okay. So automation tools, as we discussed, they that can be Selenium, that can be Playwright, that can be Cypress. Okay. And then language can be your coding language, which can be Java, Python. Let's say we have Java here, and framework. So as each of these languages have a different framework of their own. So TestNG is one of the popular language from Java side, and similarly for Python, the most popular one is PyTest. Okay, so that's why you need some understanding about TestNG framework, which falls under Java. Okay, okay. I mean, I guess you were able to see that. Okay, and the last thing is you need to know manual testing concept, because see, the thing is, before writing any automation script, you need to know how the flow actually works in the manual way, because you need to know what steps are to be followed, right? After that you can write a script to automate it. That's why you need to know about the manual testing concepts as well, and the type of work involved. So these people run some existing test cases. Obviously they convert some Excel sheet scenarios which are given to them into actual scripts, then they run them on the testing suites which are already being set. Now who sets these? That we will be discussing in the next role. And they have to identify the failures and report to the development team, because if any bug is found, you report it to the developer team, who fixes it, and then they sends back to QA to test it again. This was about the first role. Now here comes the second role, which is QA engineer. So this role is more focused towards automation. Okay, you can see the average CTC is from 5 to 8.5. This data I got from AmbitionBox, so it is mostly correct. And the skills required for this one is, now you need some better skills. You need to know ops concepts properly. You need to know about API testing, and you must have heard about Postman and Requestly, where we perform API testing and we check if API responses are working nicely, correctly. So you need to know about API testing as well. Then why do you need database knowledge for testing? Because some test cases involve uh, the data input and some interactions with the database. So you need to have database knowledge as well here. And then again, manual testing concepts are always needed for any automation role, because that's how you automate the things. Okay. So now the type of work involves just beyond scripting, and they perform API automation as we discussed. And so entire module is checked here. Okay. Now going to the next role, which is SDET. So as you can see the name here, which says software development engineer in test. So there is a mention of development engineer, but in testing. So what's the difference between this? So when I started as an intern, I started as a QA engineer, like the automation one. Like it was a role between first and second, but when I joined as full time in the other company, the product based company, it is SDET role. So I required some DSA skills for that, and those skills were developed when I started learning about web development and the full stack things. Okay, that's what the skills are mentioned here. Then as in this one we discussed, right, what is a test suite. test suite. Okay, so test suite involves these three things. So this is just a classic thing where the Selenium is the automation tool, Java is the language, and TestNG is the framework. But there are some instances where the customers or the companies don't stick to only single framework. They add multiple frameworks. So you need to have a combination of all of them. Like the test suite should be able to have features of multiple frameworks. So that entire setup is developed by this person, the SDET, who needs the skills to develop the automation frameworks from scratch. Okay, before moving to the slide. And then there's mention of CI/CD, which is the pipeline integrations. You guys must have learned about this in SCPM, like we used to have this subject. Now the course name could have been changed, but it mentions about continuous integration and continuous delivery. It talks about pipelines where there is a integration between all the stages where the things are developed, some workflow runs when there are any changes observed, and then the cycle goes on and on. Okay, having said this, these were the skills required. Now the type of work involved. So these people work closely with the developers, and they have to check how the code behavior is, and it involves more understanding of the code as well, and not just the scenarios, because you need to know how the code behaves, and based on that you need to see what could be the edge cases around it. Okay, then next section is handle regression, scalability, and performance. Okay, for this, to explain this, I have a really nice example. And also we have mentioned about production readiness and deployment. These things are handled by these people. So in testing industry, there are two major type of testing you will hear, which is one is unit testing and the other one is regression testing. So what is unit testing? Let's understand this easily with a simple example. So we have a industry like a car company which produces race cars. Race cars are known for their performance, for their speeding, and all the features they provide. Okay, so let's say for a race car, there are new doors introduced. So it is a feature. It was a feature request by the people who use the cars. They were like, we want some nice handles or some new technology to improve the doors. Okay, so new doors were added to the car, and now see how the testing goes. So for the door, you will check all the features, if the handle is working properly, if the hinges are nice, if the door has, like, is it easier to open and close, right? These are some of the features which you will check about the door. So this involves unit testing. So when the feature was introduced, it was checked by the in the unit testing team, and they checked, okay, the door is working properly. They said, okay, we are good to go. So this section was a single module which checked the doors section. But when the doors were installed on the car, and now see what is the difference between unit testing and regression testing. So regression testing is like, it is regressive, which means it is hardcore. You test each and every constituent of the thing. So in this case, in regression, we will check the entire performance of the car. In that, we will check if the car is able to have all the properties it had before, or it should go beyond that. It should not reduce the properties, or it should not make it bad any further. And let's say in the unit testing, when the door was introduced, all the features were nice. The door had perfect function and it was easier to maneuver and all. But after adding it in the car, you can see like the doors were a bit heavy, and in the race cars, each gram matters. So the performance has dropped. Now what is the point of the race car? Because the main goal was performance, right? Now the doors are easy to access, but the performance has reduced. So you need to make the changes. You need to revert it because the feature is not good enough for the performance basis, right? So this was the thing. So like this had the industry, and this, in this photo you can see it is like a environment in which we tested it before adding it into the racetrack, which can be seen as a production environment. Production is like where it competes with the other products, it competes with the other cars, and it shows its dominance there. Okay, and after doing this, you say like you saw some other things also breaking, so you need to modify the car. You need to add some new updates to the car. So it moves back to this stage, and then the cycle goes on and on. So that's what about regression, which I mentioned here, and that's what about production readiness we talked here. And scalability. So scalability is like, uh, whenever because see, the scenarios related to testing always keep on getting added, so the scale goes on increasing. So it should not impact the entire performance of the car. entire regression suite in a bad way. So that thing also needs to be checked. And regarding scalability, we have the other roles which mentions about the leads and architects. These are the senior roles where you can see the package is too high, and you can see what all other skills required. So in this thing, these people decide what most thing related to the cost. Okay, then we have mentioned about Selenium grid and parallel execution. So to understand this Selenium grid, you need to know about Selenium architecture. And in the roadmap which I have some nice materials which you can refer and easily understand the Selenium architecture. Okay, then they need to have expertise in security and performance testing, because testing is not just about finding the edge cases. It is also about security and to ensure like the things are proper. And like you need to have those test cases which involve security testing. So like there's this attack, right? I'm not from cybersecurity, but like denial of service attack and all should not happen. So you need to have those checks as well. And yes, that's about the skills required for these roles. And type of work involved, we can see like the roadmap for the entire company or team, because they have to decide what things are to be picked and how we are going ahead with this. Then how to reduce the time and how to reduce testing time, because that's what matters. Like there's usually a regression which runs on the product before the new releases are done, new features are rolled out. So that usually runs at night. Like there's nightly regression, there's day regression. So you need to have that entire thing done in less time, right? So you need to check things if things can be executed parallelly, which will reduce time. Then even cost matters, right? Okay. Then mentoring junior engineers, because and there's these people are also involved in taking interviews where there are technical rounds, right? So these people are also involved in taking interviews for some roles, junior roles. And then there are some bottlenecks where someone is not able to perform well in the team. So these people need to guide them and help them go through. So these were some of the roles which we discussed here. And let's see what do we have ahead. Okay. So in this section, like, are we underestimating Selenium? Because since the beginning of the session, I'm just talking about testing, testing, and testing. So is Selenium only about testing, or do we have other things in the basket?
Yeah.